Radio Free America, the talk show for intelligent Americans, with your host, Tom Valentine.
Well, we are on. And by golly, all you intelligent Americans gather around because we have an intelligent American that's going to come on and tell you about something that he's been instigating. Yes, we have in our midst an instigator. He's also an actor. He does a lot of things. He's an activist, a populist. His name is John Quade. If you're keeping score at home, it's a Q-U-A-D-E. John Quade is out in the high desert of California, and he is, are you the founder of this idea of the Jural societies, John?
No.
You're not?
No, it's been around for thousands of years.
Thousands of years? Well, I don't mean that. I mean this region.
I know you don't. So as far as its modern rebirth here in California and now in 12, 14 other states, no, I did not originate it. It was originated by a group of guys in L.A. County, and they decided to sit down one day and come up with a solution insofar as restarting or jump-starting a type of local government that would adhere to law and not to emergency powers and statutes and War Powers Act and all that kind of stuff.
In other words, we cut the pressure back as much as possible with the good old-fashioned common law.
Exactly.
All right, now the Jural Society, you say it was started in Los Angeles. I had never heard of it until just as things will happen, serendipity. A fellow who sent me some stuff, he'd like to be on the show, and he has just helped form the Michigan Jural Society, and evidently you helped him do it.
Well, there's several of us out here in California. A year and a half ago, I guess there was only half a dozen of us that were basically working towards this end, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, the whole thing started taking off, and suddenly, I guess it was because we probably didn't have our arguments together as to why there was a Jural Society, and we were still finalizing the research and establishing the necessary lawful nexus and everything else between a locally elected political body and common law courts and militia and everything else. In other words, the whole apparatus of government, but at a very low, in terms of size, level, at the local level. And we just started doing it. It happened in L.A. County, so I couldn't be a member down there, but I attended several meetings, and I cogitated on it a while, and then when the time came, several of us decided that we were going to start propagating this across California.
Has the Los Angeles Times paid you any mind?
No.
I'm not surprised. All right. John Quade, I'm going to ask you to explain. First of all, it's an interesting term, Jural, G-U-R-A-L. Is there such a word other than this?
Yes, in Black's Law Dictionary, J-U-R-A-L is defined in Black's as an organized political community.
Is that right?
Yes.
So here's a beautiful word that none of us actually, or I shouldn't speak for everybody, and by the way, when I say you started this, I mean that's the editorial you, all of you guys out there in California that you are now speaking for.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And your organization, the Jural Society, and a body of organized law, is that it?
Well, yes. Basically what we do is you get 20, 25 people together. Form of martial law, etc., since April 21st, 1861.
Since the
war between the states, yes. We had, basically what happened was the Congress walked out, 7 southern states walked out without a proper adjournment or recess or anything else, and according to parliamentary law, the body of Congress was thus sine die. All right, that's a Latin term which means without day, literally. And in other words, there was no day set to reconvene, so the body ceased to exist lawfully. And at the end of the war between the states, there was a declaration of an end to hostilities, but there was never any formal declaration by the commander-in-chief, who's the only one who can issue the executive order, that martial law had been terminated, because during the war that had been ceded through the adjutant general's office to all the commanders in the field to suspend the writ of habeas corpus at will and declare martial law. That was done, and it was under the gun barrel that the southern states approved the 14th Amendment, and basically, the Congress has been operating ever since then under executive order because they were ordered back into session by the president.
You know, it's amazing the number of American meatheads in the mainstream who have no idea what an executive order is. And yet we are evidently governed by them.
Well, that's basically what it comes down to, because the president is not acting as the president of the United States. If he did, why, the Constitution would still be valid. But under the executive order, martial rule, emergency powers government, the Constitution is purely optional.
Purely optional. Isn't that nice? All right, we're going to take our first break.
Purpose, they use it. When it doesn't suit their purpose, they don't use it.
Very good. My guest is John Quade, and we're going to be talking about the Jural societies that you can set up in your area with they'll give you a little help and show you how, and that's their purpose. The Jural societies. I'm Tom Valentine. This is Radio Free America. I'm on, and I'm on with John Quade of the Jural Society, and he is out in the high desert area and out there by Palmdale and Lancaster and the Edwards Air Force Base, Rosamond, all kinds of places out there. Are you a desert rat, John?
No. I look like one, but I'm not, no. I actually wear, nice clothes.
Is that right? And you actually work and live out there in that desert community?
Yes, of course. I love it out here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, with your nature of work, you've been on television and movies and things like that. Just a long commute.
Well, yeah, except that I don't work a heck of a lot anymore in film and television.
So you are concentrating on the Jural societies?
Yes, sir.
I think that's terrific. All right, we've got people all over the United States, and a lot of them are going to be perking up and saying, well, I'd like to do something like this in my town. And how can it have any real impact on the society? Because I know it has impact on people who believe that this is the way to go. But this fellow in Tampa, for example, has been railing against the authorities and representing, I think, very well the common law point of view, but the media are unkind to him, and the people are unkind to him, and nobody wants to listen to him.
Well, that's easily fixed by the Jural Society.
All right.
Because once the Jural Society is organized in a pro tem, with a pro tem status, that is, all offices are temporary until elected by the people in the county, and those who can elect are those who have no registration or liens against their property by the federal and state governments and county and city governments. In other words, you have to deregister in order to vote for these people.
Now, why would that be?
Well, because when you register to vote in all 50 states, why, the state puts a lien against all your property for the ship of state. And thus you're bound by all your properties encumbered and all your rights are encumbered thereby.
I didn't know.
And thus you're not free to really vote or elect anyone. And basically, if you get 500 or 1,000 people together in the county, and you submit, the Jural Society submits a slate of candidates for the head of the Jural Society and the secretary, the treasurer, the scribe, which is the record keeper, and other offices, the herald and sergeant at arms, and those offices are elected by the county at large, who are not registered voters, but who have cleared their status as a voter with the Jural Society.
Now, you've hit something that I probably should have known, but I didn't know. I've been on this show now for 7.5 years, and I certainly should have known this, but if you register to vote, there's a lien on your property by the very nature that you registered to vote.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Section 6100 of the Elections Code in California. I don't know what it is elsewhere. Well, I mean, the specific sections of the state code.
But they always do this in the state code, do they?
Yes. It's in the elections code, usually, or the political code.
And why do they do that?
Because, essentially, the state operates as a franchised entity of the federal government under emergency powers and martial rule. It's thus a de facto entity, and a de facto entity requires assurance, or insurance is another word for it. The de facto entity requires assurance to its principal, which in this case is the United States government, that it has sufficient assets to function as a viable economic entity. And in order to do that, why, when you elect people to that particular body, you have to register with that body.
Mm-hmm.
And any registered property is automatically liened, like the title in your car when you register it. There's an automatic lien in principle against your property. That's also utilized by the state to guarantee their surety, rather, for the state debt. Anything registered is automatically affected by a lien or levy in principle of some sort.
Well, the way you just described that to me smacks that somebody understood what they were doing when the states were no longer sovereign states joined together in a union under the Constitution, but like this said, the martial law of 1861, then they would have needed this kind of assurance.
Yes, they would have. Yes, they would have. See, I know there's a lot of guys out there who have been fighting this battle for a long, long time.
Yep.
Even longer than I have, and I've been in it for 6 or 8 years. And there's a lot of guys been fighting it longer than that. And a lot of them have been losing because they've been operating under the misapprehension that they had constitutional protections. And the only way you're going to get constitutional protections is if you have a lawful republic extant in existence. All right?
And this is why the judges with impunity can say there's no constitution in this court.
Exactly. Because
right.
judges wouldn't. And now, why is that?
Well, we're going to find out. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and find out why that is. We're talking with John Quade of the Jural Society out in California. I'm Tom Valentine, Radio Free America. We are back live, and John Quade of the Jural Society, and I want you to continue on where you were there. This is very interesting.
Well, basically what it comes down to, the reason why people lose when they try to take a constitutional argument into these local courts and in the municipal courts and things of that nature, traffic cases and things like that, the reason why they lose all the time is because first of all, they're not in a court that can hear a constitutional argument or even an argument of the common law or anything else. Why is that? If you look at the flag next to the judge, you can see very clearly that it's on a pole with gold fringe around it. And if you read the manual of colors for the Armed Forces of the United States, you'll find out that flag is only flown by one person and one office, that is, the Commander-in-Chief. Note, it is not flown by the President, because the President, in his lawful authority as President, only flies the banner of the United States, not the flag. The banner is not on a pole, and it has no gold fringe around it. It's the U.S. flag, and it's mounted usually vertically with the stripes up and down, vertically to the floor, and it usually hangs against a wall. Now, in some of the old motion pictures way back when, we used to see movies where the courts were that way in other buildings. But the point is that's the symbol of the lawful civil authority. Bottom line is, when you go into such courts, you're in a court of basically a summary court-martial proceeding, the rules of which are found in pamphlet number 27-9, the Military Judges Bench Handbook. And if you also pick up the 1994 Manual of Courts-Martial, there's a special section in there on summary court-martial proceedings against civilians. And by the way, you won't find in your state codes a definition of traffic infraction, but you will find it in the military codes and the Manual of Courts-Martial.
You're kidding me. You mean that the state of California doesn't have in the traffic code a traffic infraction?
It doesn't list a definition anywhere in the codes for infraction. It isn't there.
But it is in the UCMJ.
But it is in the UCMJ. It's in the Manual of Courts-Martial, 1994 edition, available at the Government Printing Office. And the procedures utilized by the judge are in the Military Judges Bench Handbook. That's pamphlet 27-9. Okay? In other words, the judge's word is law. Why is that? Because in a military situation, lawful process is too cumbersome for the military representative of the Commander-in-Chief to use. His only function there is to collect payments or war reparations on the war debt.
Very interesting. So it's less cumbersome And we want to make it cumbersome. We wanted to have good, strong civil laws then, or
But what the
common law.
Jural societies have done here in California by basically banding together in their research effort and everything else, they've come up with non-statutory abatements that, for the first time in as long as I can remember, it's process that actually, in fact, works against anyone it's brought against. In the last 9 months, the various Jural societies in California have used the non-statutory abatements and asseverations. I don't know how many hundreds of times. I only know about 70 or 80 cases. I know they've beaten, from my personal knowledge, they've taken on and beaten the IRS 27 times in a row without a single loss. They've removed liens and levies in as short a time as 22 minutes. We had one woman who had her $21,000 and change seized by the IRS through a bank account, and she took a copy of an asseveration of lien levy down to the IRS office and handed it to the agent in charge, and 22 minutes later she had her money back. Now, the bottom line is this paperwork works because we use only lawful process. We don't use the process that they use. We use lawful process. Lawful process means you don't write anyone's name in all capital letters unless they're an agent or representative or a sign of an emergency powers entity. In other words, the phrase State of California is written in all caps, and it's called a nom de guerre, or war name, all right, in the law. And you can go back as far as Jacob's Dictionary of Law, 1792, to find the first instance of that, at least here in America. And a nom de guerre comes under the international law and municipal law, which applies in all martial rule or emergency power situations. Don't go in there with constitutional arguments, you ain't going to win. Don't go in there, don't make any special appearance, don't make any personal appearance, don't argue jurisdiction. The bottom line is, when the rules of international and municipal law are compared to the common law, the maxims of law, and the constitutional maxims, they are unlawful process. All right? There can be no lawful process in a municipal power or international power in the United States from any existing city, county, state, or federal government. They don't have it. There is no such thing as lawful process. So we merely use the non-statutory abatement to give them notice of the fact that, hey, first off, I'm not a nom de guerre. All right? You spelled my name wrong here, guys. And my name is my private Christian name. All three names is properly spelled as capital J, lowercase O-H-N. Capital Q, lowercase U-A-D-E. Okay? Look at your driver's license. It's in all caps. It's a nom de guerre. It's an artificially created entity, a war entity. Look at your Social Security card. Your name's in all caps. Look at all correspondence from the IRS and the state and the county and the city governments.
All right, and we are talking with John Quade, and I know there's a lot of you out there with calls and questions. We will go to the phones, and we'll tell you how to get in touch with him and so forth shortly. I'm Tom Valentine. This is Radio Free America.
Telephone lamp to talk to Tom Valentine and his guest is lit. Dial area code 813-573-0190. Once again, that's area code 813-573-0190, and be a part of the program. Now back to Tom Valentine.
All right, we are back, and we're talking with John Quade. And you know, John, I just looked at all this stuff, and of course, the first time I ever saw an all capitals typewriter was when I was in the Navy as a signalman.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's the nom de guerre, eh?
Yes, uh-huh.
And
all names written in all caps are nom de guerres. Also, names written in upper and lower case where one name, usually the middle, has been abbreviated is also a form of nom de guerre because it has no standing in law. The only name in which anyone can be prosecuted or an action can be filed against them according to the rule of law is in their full Christian name. And I use the word Christian because that's what the book says. In its Christian name can a man be sued, and in that name only. Now, if you look at the process used by the IRS and the federal and the state governments, the county governments, the state income tax people, I mean, we've used non-statutory abatements, which simply write the law. We simply state what the law is, and the jurisdictional question never comes up because they don't have the power and the authority to answer the non-statutory lawful abatement that is usually issued through the Jural Society people. Now, what that means is that at the end of 30 days, exclusive of Sundays and holidays, we file a default judgment, and writ of precipe, or writ of right. And we have a fully completed res judicata. Final determination's been made. And you do all of this without making an appearance in court with only 2 pieces of paperwork.
All right. Now, how do people get in touch with you? We got a caller already, but how do people get in touch with you?
818.
All right.
347-7080.
That's the telephone number in the Los Angeles area for the Jural Society.
Right. That's for the people that have all the paperwork and handle all of the materials and everything else for the Jural Society, the handbook. And by the way, a new Jural Society handbook will be out in about 2 weeks.
All right.
And the non-statutory abatement packages. We also have one book that we discovered in one of the local libraries called Military Government and Martial Rule by Berkheimer, and it's 700 pages long, and when you read that book, you're going to find out why the politicians talk about democracy, because a republic cannot exist when military government is in place. All right? Why is that? Because the definition of martial rule is lawful civil authority, lawful civil process and procedure have ceased to exist.
All right, Junior in Alvin, Texas, you're on with John Quade.
Good evening, Tom, and good evening, Mr. Quade.
Good evening, Junior.
Mr. Quade, I know that you're very familiar with the War Powers Act of 32 and 33 and the other acts that followed that up.
Mm-hmm.
My question specifically as it relates to what's going on today relative to Bosnia, how long can the President commit troops under Section 2 of the War Powers Act without the Congress acting?
Well, the bottom line is that the Congress is not really essential for any function that the President chooses to engage in because he's the Commander-in-Chief and we're under martial rule. The Congress is merely a lip service.
Well, what about if they decide to defund it?
Well, it's going to be very interesting because the President has the power through executive order to fund it anyway.
Ah.
Check the Volume 1, Table of Contents for the U.S. Titles and Codes. Title 2, the Congress. Next to it, you'll see an asterisk. Look at the asterisk at the bottom of the page, and it'll tell you, not positive law, by resolution only. Now, how many people in this country know that Title II that governs the conduct of the Congress isn't even positive law? Why is that? Because the Congress was sine die, without day, and became a de facto entity ordered back into session by the President under executive order. Basically, the President can do anything he wants to do anytime he wants to do, so long as he does not disturb the public peace. That's the same rule for the military judges in the local municipal courts and the traffic courts and things like that. The U.S. District Court is basically a federal version of the lower municipal courts. And those judges can rule any way they choose to rule, so long as it does not disturb the public peace.
All right, Junior, good call. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And let me repeat the telephone number out there in Los Angeles. If you want to get in touch with the Jural Society, it's area code 818-347-7080. 818-347-7080. Let's see, if Congress wanted to right now, then Congress could convene, and they could vote to reestablish themselves.
No, they couldn't.
They couldn't.
No. See,
why not?
That's one of the basic arguments why we need a society.
All right.
Because there's only 3 ways, and we went through 242 titles in one law library on military governments and martial rule, emergency powers, and so on. Narrowed it down to 59 and selected 2, one of which was the Berkheimer book that I mentioned already. And Berkheimer makes it very clear there's only 3 ways that emergency powers and martial rule can be terminated.
All right, and we're going to come back to those 3 ways after this break. My guest is John Quade, the very fascinating Jural societies and the common law and the laws of which we live under in this land. I'm Tom Valentine. This is Radio Free America.
The telephone lamp to talk to Tom Valentine and his guest is lit. Dial area code 813-573-0190. Once again, that's area code 813-573-0190. And be a part of the program. Now back to Tom Valentine.
All right, we are back, and John Quade of the Jural Society, that's Jural Society out of Los Angeles, area code 818-347-7080 to get in contact with them and find out what they offer and how it can help you. You say before we go back to the phones, I want to get this one. There's 3 ways that this can be straightened out.
Yes.
Only 3 ways.
Only 3 ways. Number 1, the chief executive or the commander-in-chief can issue an executive order to terminate it. Number 2, a conquering power, read UN in parenthesis, can terminate it. Or number 3, and the most important as far as the Jural societies are concerned, the people themselves can restore lawful civil authority, process, and procedure. And that's precisely what we do through the Jural Society. And then we provide the covering for the common law court, the militia, etc., and all the apparatus of government at the local level, only we do it through maxims of law, constitutional maxims, and the common law.
You know, I would like, if I were in television, I would arrange a televised debate between your Jural Society people and some law school professors.
Well, they don't know what we're doing.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It would be wonderful to get up there and let them try to argue with this.
See, one of the keys to this thing that we discovered about 2 years ago, we were tinkering with this idea, trying to develop the theory of the case with hard data, when one of our guys got a summons in court, in U.S. District Court, to produce his books and records and all that kind of good stuff. And he went down there, and he stood up when the judge called his name, and he went forward, and he said, "Your Honor, may I say something?" And the judge said, "Yes." So he said, "Greetings and salutations in the name of my sovereign King and Lord, Jesus Christ. First, I wish to state that I am not the person named in this particular action by virtue of the fact that my name is not spelled capital R, capital A, capital N, capital D, capital Y, and so on. In fact, my private Christian name is capital R, lowercase a, N, D, Y. My flag is the original flag of the California Republic, and my law is the law of the King James Bible." Now, what do you think happened? Very simply, the judge said, "Sir, would you pick up your books and papers and things and go sit in the gallery?" And he did that. The judge turned to the United States Attorney and said, "Sir, what do you have to say about this case of mistaken identity?" The United States Attorney hummed and hawed and blew smoke and everything else. "Well, Your Honor, he seems to think there's some special significance in the capitalization of his name and all this kind of good stuff, blah, blah, blah." And the judge said, "Very well, next case."
But then that was a rare judge that may have understood this thing about the nom de guerre.
No, sir, they all understand it at the federal level, because 2 weeks later, exactly the same scenario with a different judge and a different defendant was done with exactly the same results. We knew then, for certain, we had confirmation of the rule or the maxim of international law that personal appearance negates all defects of process. In other words, if you show up, you negate or set aside all possible objections to unlawful process and jurisdiction that they may have imposed on you, because in order to plead charge the jurisdiction or bring a counter challenge, you have to concede jurisdiction.
That's right, you're there.
You're already there.
Yeah, but if you get in there and point out that you're not there because that's not your name.
Exactly.
I would have bet that the judge would have said, "Don't give me that stuff. Sit down and let's get on with this court."
No, sir. We had within the next month and a half to 2 months, we had about 12, 14 people, all of whom repeated exactly the same scenario in different judges, different district courts, and every single time it always worked the same.
All right, you know what you're going to need. It's not that no one believes you. It's that in order to give the truth credibility, unfortunately we deal in a world of credibility and the truth doesn't count. Were these cases where they had a court reporter going?
No.
Okay. That's going to be a tough one. But anyway, it's fascinating, and let's go to Fred in New Freedom, Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir. How are you this evening?
Fine.
Well, I'm just curious what this organization can do under Geneva Convention law.
We don't use Geneva Convention law because that's international law.
Yes, sir. Well, there's a situation here on the East Coast, and I'm calling from Pennsylvania. I'm a professional firefighter with 30 years experience in hazmat. I was amazed and outraged at the atrocities done at Waco, Texas. And I looked at the Waco, Texas incident with a hazmat view. And they used a form of gas called C as in cat, S as in Sam gas. In January of '93, this gas was outlawed by the Geneva Convention as a war gas.
Yes.
Yet all over the eastern seaboard, local police departments, federal, state, county, and borough police departments still have this gas stockpiled throughout the area. And I'm just curious what your organization can do or can steer me in the way to get rid of this gas on American citizens, which is an outlawed war gas.
Well, you get rid of the guys that are holding the gas, and that way you get rid of the gas too.
All right, now here's the first thing you have to remember. The law and the statutes has no bearing on the question, because the military doctrine of necessity, as far as the civil power is concerned, the doctrine of necessity dictates final determination and final usage of the law.
All right, we got to take a break, but you can hang in there. And Fred, if you'd like to hang on, you may. I'm Tom Valentine. This is Radio Free America.
Sometimes your local newspaper will have the news, but they tend to put a peculiar spin on it. Maybe you've noticed. For instance, everybody is doing stories on how the FBI wronged Randy Weaver. But if you go through the old editions, you'll find many of these same newspapers branded him an enemy to all right-thinking people a couple of years ago when the government attacked him. Now, thanks to the First Amendment, the Spotlight was here to tell the truth about federal domestic terrorism from the beginning. That's one of the reasons 250,000 people read the Spotlight every week. They want real news, not the propaganda put out by moguls. Put some real news in your diet. Subscribe to the Spotlight. A year-long subscription costs just $40. Call 1-800-522-6292. Use your Visa or MasterCard when ordering. That free call again is 1-800-522-6292 for the Spotlight.
Live on Radio Free America, and we're talking with John Quade of the Jural Society. He's out in California. Fred from New Freedom, Pennsylvania has asked a question, and you mentioned that, and I can understand, a military court certainly would have a thing called the doctrine of necessity, huh?
Well, the whole reason for imposing martial powers and emergency powers in the first place is it's done by necessity. That's the alleged doctrine. I think William Pitt said that the doctrine of necessity is the doctrine of tyrants and slaves, and it's really been used to cover a multitude of sins, including Waco and Ruby Creek and a lot of other places that we all know about. But the point is that under the doctrine of necessity, there is no lawful civil authority under a martial power, so what you guys in Pennsylvania need to do is reestablish lawful civil authority and process. And you do that by organizing a local political body known as a Jural Society. You organize them at the county and sub-county level, and when you have 3 or 4 Jural Societies at the county level, then you form a county Jural Society, and when you've got a majority of the counties in your state with 1 or more Jural Societies, then you form a state Jural Societies, and eventually, when we have enough states, we'll form a national Jural Society. But the bottom line is, in California, in the last 8 months, we've already acquired a majority of the counties with one or more Jural societies, and we've already held our first preliminary meeting to organizing the state Jural Society convention.
And you said to me on the phone off the air the other day that my hometown, San Luis Obispo, may be getting one too.
Yes, sir. It'll probably happen in the next 3 weeks.
How about that, Fred? You can get rid of that hazmat by forming a Jural Society in your county out there in New Freedom, PA.
Well, let's hope it works.
All right, you can find out all the information by calling out in area code 818. That's the Los Angeles Valley area, Pasadena and so on. 818-347-7080.
Okay, sir.
They'll send you out the literature that you and tell you how to buy the books and so on that they have to offer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I might add, by the way, Tom, that
Sure.
almost everything that we sell is $25 or less, with a little shipping fee usually tacked on it.
All right.
But the non-statutory abatement package is $25. We also sell a floppy disk to help people organize a Jural Society by using the California codification of the common law from 1872, Robert's Rules of Order, etc. That's $25. The Berkheimer book on military government and martial rule is $30 because it's so large and costs so much to duplicate, and it's also rebound. And all of our materials are very, very low in cost. I think the new Jural Society handbook, I think, is going to be $12.50, and it's almost 100 pages bound. And if you want to put a zip code on there, put it in brackets or parenthesis or something, because anything in brackets, parenthesis, curly braces, or a box or otherwise delineated has no force and effect in law, because it's merely extraneous, explanatory, and interpolated matter.
Okay, put it in parentheses, and it is...
And tell me what you want, and we'll get it processed usually within 48 hours. It goes out. It goes back out again.
Well, that's very good. Well, John, I want to learn more, and what we'll do is we'll bring you back again in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you. That was an excellent bit of information.
Yes, sir.
And I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yes, sir. So am I.
All right. Good
God
night.
bless.
Okay, and many thanks to Jim Thomas at Media Bypass for telling me about John Quade. And we will have him back to continue this talking about Jural societies. We may have to do it this way. And it makes sense. All right, we're getting near the end of the hour. Tomorrow night, George Fowler of the Barnes Review and Joyce Riley of the who is an advocate on the Gulf War Syndrome. And a special thanks to Paul Blum and Ron Michaels, the two producers that are bringing Radio Free America out there. Excellent job tonight, as usual. And I don't very often acknowledge them, but they're worth it. Good night, everybody. They're playing my song.